Welcome to Moving Through and Beyond, a podcast dedicated to sharing inspired journeys of redefining life, vision, and purpose after immense hardship and grief. My goal with this podcast is to give you hope and to let my guest journeys inspire you to make the choice to keep looking up. I'm your host, Carey Conley. Welcome, everybody, to the Moving Through and Beyond podcast. I'm Carey Conley, your host, and I get the honor and the blessing to bring you some people that, as a speaker and a coach, and I travel quite a bit, I get to meet out in my world. And I am just so excited to introduce you to a woman I met a little over a year ago who is a speaker. She's a podcast host as well. I've been on her podcast called F.I.T, international travel, 2-time best-selling author. And I just can't wait for her to share her story with you. So Tamra, thank you so much for being here with me.
Super, super honored, Carey. It's really one of these spaces that I know are critical to have conversations that are hard. And
Right.
A lot of people aren't having them. And so for people to get a behind the scenes and a real deep dive, whether they're driving to work, whether they're working out, whether they're cooking breakfast for their little ones, I hope that you guys who are listening just feel safe in this space, and it evokes hope in you to be able to do the same for other people.
Right. You know, Tamra, I watch you all over Instagram and Facebook and all the things. And you are, I have to tell you, probably one of the most vivacious human beings I've ever met.
Thank you. I have been called a human sparkler before. Yesterday was my birthday, and someone was like, "I think I need you to be my cake topper." I'm like, "Yes, I will be a cake topper."
You know what? And I agree with that. And happy birthday to you. And
Thank you.
You just exude happiness and joy and light. And I know that's a big goal of yours in this world. But, like all of us showing up on Instagram, looking our best, we all have a story somewhere of something that was really challenging in our life that we needed to get through. And I would love for you to take a few moments to kind of share a little bit about your story.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I want people to know, like, even though when I was little, people always told me that I lit up a room. And I think if you look back to your past, there are things in beauty, not the negative things that people might have said or cast over you, that you were like when you were small. And they've maybe been misplaced in your life. Maybe you put them on a shelf. Maybe they're dusty and they need to be dusted off. Well, for me, lighting up a room was something that ended up turning into false reality. And I felt like I had to be that way. I felt like it was the only expectation. I ended up feeling like the mask, right? Where like I've worn this so many times that I now can't take it off, and I've become this identity. And that light of space, that light of being an inner light and also an exterior light to others, ended up dwindling inside of me. And I felt really void, and I felt like there was just like a dark chasm to who I was when I went out in public and who I was even in my marriage and as a mother, compared to who I wanted to be and who I was being in the shadows. I don't know if people can relate to that, but I wanted to create symmetry to the person I wanted to be and the person that I had become. And so I wrote a book about it called Always Becoming. And so if you want to get into the nitty gritty details, we can. But are there any specific questions as I'm sharing?
Yeah, so I can relate to what you're saying because I was that little girl as well, very bubbly, very outgoing, always the leader in the group, right? I was always the one,
the trendsetter.
Yeah, totally. All the things. I was the oldest in my daycare when I grew up.
Yes.
And so I was the one that was always instigating, always, guiding people. And I think because of that, I too felt like, okay, I've got to be in that role in every area of my life.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of disappear,
right?
We lose our creativity. And as an adult, it becomes, like you said, such a mask that we don't even really realize that we're wearing it.
Right.
Until we get a feeling of, you just mentioned dark despair, right?
Yeah.
Are there moments in your life? So describe to me, what that felt like. Can you pinpoint like one moment where you felt like, wow, this is really not good?
Yeah, 1000%. So I was a serial entrepreneur in my 20s, still sort of am, but it's all very honed into one mission now. And at that time, I was running 2 different companies. One was a global nursing bra line, and one was a local brick and mortar with an e-commerce representation. And I was working about 70 hours a week. I had a new husband of about 4 years at that point and 2 kids under the age of 2. And I pulled into my driveway and I had just finished nursing my daughter. daughter. She had just weaned. She was 9 months old, and I couldn't wait for her to come like waddling over to me. She was already walking at this point. And I got out of my car. Mind you, we're the youngest family in the neighborhood. We have the white picket fence, new cars. My husband was outside. The kids were playing. It's like the picture perfect. We've literally even been called Barbie and Ken before. And I was trying to live under that guise. And it was a lot of pressure. And simultaneously running these businesses, and money being a huge element of accolade and success that I had been striving for, because you hear of being rich and famous, right? That's what you hear, even little kids. What do you want to be when I grow up? Oh, you want to be rich? Wait, like something is wrong with this picture. But that's what I was living out. So when I was anticipating her come to run into my arms, she kind of looked at me. I got a little smirk, but then she turned around and walked towards Dada. And my heart was just like, oh, like my gut. But instead of actually pursuing her, as we know, and I am a practicer of the Christian faith and love God, he pursues us every single day. I didn't pursue her. Instead, I sat in that void. I sat in that shame. I sat in that moment of, I'm not good enough. I'm not the best mom. And I had this reflection moment as I went inside. And am I going to have a tombstone that says that I'm an entrepreneur? Is that it? Is that what I'm really good at? Is that the only thing that people are going to remember me as? Or what I prayed for when I was a little girl, to be a good wife and to be a good mom, which do I want more? And what's worth risking to lose based on my identity? So about a couple of hours, in fact, later from that moment, I was discovered in my shadows. And what I mean by that is I had stepped out on my husband, and he discovered how and why and when. And it was in the middle of the night when he woke me up, and my whole life came crashing to a halt. Wow. And that shame that you carry when anyone finds something out about you that's either been done to you, because shame is not just what we've done wrong, it's what others have done wrong as well, that we carry as this blanketed identity. And so the shadow and the light were finally both exposed at the same time. And I had a choice. And my choice was, do I live out that tombstone? Do I just make a lot of money and let that be my happiness? Or do I lean into what I believe are much harder roles? And that's being a wife and a mom. And I chose the latter.
Right. Wow, you are speaking to so many women right now.
Yeah.
Because that is a dilemma for us, right? Who are we as a person, number one? Who are we in the role of wife and mom? But then we also want to be successful in the thing that we're passionate about. And you and I being in the entrepreneurial world, it's not uncommon for us as entrepreneurs to work 70 hours a week.
Yep.
Not think anything about it until, like you said, you had a moment where it just came crashing down.
Yep.
And you had to make a choice. So at that moment, what did you do with the businesses? Did you decide to shut them down? Did you
almost immediately? Yeah, wow. Almost immediately. And that was kind of an option, right? I call it a forced quit. and I could look at it through the lens of my husband, or I could look at it through the lens of the Lord. And I know that God was guiding me towards that moment of just release. And funny enough, my word for last year was release. And even though I released those things 7 years ago, we're always in a state of learning to release things that we have a grip on, a grip of control. We as women like to control things, right? A release of expectation, like what is this supposed to be versus what is it actually, versus having these false realities of this is my life and this is what it's going to be like forevermore. But we have an opportunity to change and to shift and to become what God has created us to be. And for me, it was, I wanted to become the wife and the mom that I knew are going to one day be on my tombstone. I wanted to stand in integrity. I wanted to remove the mask. I wanted to remove the weight of the shadow. And for me, it was this 3-year journey of unpacking the why. Nobody chooses to misstep on purpose, or especially not if they're going to potentially hurt people that they truly love. And I didn't understand myself. I couldn't understand the actions I was taking or not taking. I couldn't understand the thought patterns that I was cycling in my head. And I knew some of it was generational legacy / curse. For me, it was curse. And it went further back through my exploration of going to therapy and going to church simultaneously. So I believe we are a mind, body, and a soul with purpose. And you can't just heal your spiritual man without also healing your mindset and your body associated to that. And
Right.
I was revealed in that time that I had actually had a sexual encounter when I was really, really little by a kiddo who actually had a mental handicap. And so it was a sexual assault. He was much older than me. He was much bigger than me. I remember being shushed into shame at that point.
Mm.
And I literally acted out of that shame, moving forward in the shadows for pretty much 3 decades.
Wow.
And I was exposed to pornography really young. Cyber sex was a part of our conversation with AOL dial-up internet. People sext now. I never got into the porn industry, which I'm really grateful for, but I know some people have a stronghold in that space. And so I reveal all of this. And I did it when I started jumping back into entrepreneurship. And I was told by people, this will be a death sentence. This will be a death sentence to your career. This will be a death sentence to potentially even your marriage. But we are built on a firm rock. We have come back into intimacy in a way that I never knew possible. We are in this together. He speaks through me and with me. And my husband and I are more in love now than we ever have been. And we know each other through and through, which I know is the intention of a covenant love. We just actually renewed our 10-year wedding
Saw
vows,
that. It was so
and my kids
lovely.
got to see it.
Yeah.
So there is good. There is hope. There is hope in every area of your life that feels like it's a demise.
Right. Wow. So much to unpack here. So I know that there are, again, so many women listening that would love to get out of this grind of the 70 hours of work thing, 70 hours a week, right? And I'm sure that did not just happen overnight, that you took some steps
Yeah.
to, because I have a lot of women come to me too going, I don't like this lifestyle I've built, but I don't see how I can get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the finances that we've built, the lifestyle we've built, I can't just shut it all down. So they feel like they're handcuffed to it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you took some steps in that journey. Can you share just maybe 1 or 2 tips? And then I want to talk a little bit more about how you rebuilt your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I stopped it. I quit it all. I gave away a 9-figure contract to another CEO. I had a store that I was a partnership in. And so we relinquished the partnership to that other person. And I paused for the first time in my entire life. I paused. And I highly, highly recommend, if you have the capability to do so, to do it, especially if you're in a place where you have hustled to a point where your finances can sustain you. We actually went into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt during that time. I didn't know this. My husband was hiding this from me because he was just trying to keep our marriage afloat. And I thought financially we were doing great. But there's points of revelation where when you pause, you have an opportunity to breathe into your greater purpose. And
Right.
my greater purpose didn't exist as an entrepreneur. And I love what I do as an entrepreneur now, but it's not the core of my identity. And so I had to go on a self-exploration journey. This is why the book by Jay Shetty, Think Like a Monk, or the Road Less Traveled, or there's so many books I could think of, where even Eat, Love, Pray, where Julia Roberts in the movie, or even through the book of Elizabeth Gilbert, phenomenal book. Like, do that thing. Do that thing that is ailing you and pulling at you and calling you into something different. If peace sounds like another language to you, I promise you better stop now, or the peace will be on your knees before long. You'll have no choice but to discover peace. And so I really encourage people to find the pause, take the pause. And as I mentioned earlier, be in the willingness to go to therapy and also to go to a community of spirituality. You need to find and to explore what spirituality is to you. And to me, it was who God is, because when I discovered him and he discovered me, that relentless, reckless pursuit of coming after me like he did, I got to establish my identity, not based on my mirror moments, but based on his mirror. And I get to stand in that image creator space of freedom, because nothing I can do will ever be perfect. I get stuff wrong all the time, but it's now knowing that in that there is a freedom of glorifying him rather than glorifying myself.
Mm-hmm. You know, I can relate to this pause, Tamra. You know, after I lost my husband to suicide in 2014, I ran for the next 3 years. I had just started a business and it was taking off.
Mm-hmm.
It was a blessing because it kept me really busy.
Sure.
While I was readjusting in Arizona, my daughter was going through college. And then when I lost my son 3 years later, that was where I had to take literally almost a year of that pause. So I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, so many of us have to be knocked down
Yeah.
to take the pause.
True.
And then, but so many beautiful things you're saying here. And again, I can relate to this, is that you find yourself in those pauses.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's this sheer adversity that we get. I feel like it feels like when God, pushed Moses to the edge of the water and said, "Y'all just gonna wait right here."
Yep. Yep. For sure.
Yeah. So he took some steps. I think it scares people to know that, if they shut everything down, that they're going to have to make some financial shifts.
Yeah.
But it all works out.
Well, at the
It
end of
all
the
works out.
day, my pastor had said, and it previously, and it just always sticks with me, that you can't take a hearse to heaven.
Right.
Right. You literally can't take that with you. And even if your main goal is legacy and it's generational wealth that you want to pass by, even if you were to give a massive lump sum to your child or a nonprofit or anything, it isn't going to sustain you. It doesn't sustain you. Money is fictitious. It's just a number. Your worth is not based on what car you drive, what house you live in, what your finances are. Now, I understand you need it, and it's a amazing way to multiply goodness in the earth. But it's also a major way to keep you addicted, to keep you in a shame-free environment or a shameful environment when you have an opportunity to not be addicted and to have shame-free living.
Yeah.
That's my passion for people,
Right.
because addictions end up being what we hold onto and grasp hold of. And sometimes our addictions can be money. Sometimes our addictions can be what people talk about, which is alcohol, what I alluded to, porn or sex or all these other pieces. But there's so much more that we're addicted to as a society that people aren't even having conversations about. Social media being one of them, shopping being another one. We are living in a consumerism space that it's normalized, and everything is around alcohol and drugs, and now things are being regulated that it's okay. And it just makes me sad, because I know ultimately it's just a suppression mechanism. Basically, politically or not, whatever your preference is, we're being indoctrinated into wearing a mask. And that is stifling our identity, and it's stifling us as a culture of empowered women and empowered men. We have no empowerment anymore because we're living underneath our stress, which is ultimately rooted in shame, which is ultimately rooted in sin.
So good. And I think that is the thing that people just don't take the time to become aware of. Like you were saying, okay, I really had to face the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
I had to face the shame. I had to face the pain.
Yeah.
And I had to get help. Mm-hmm. And being willing to work at it. Kudos to you and your husband for really, really wanting to work through what for most marriages is demise.
Yeah.
Right. It's a choice that you all made, that we're gonna work through this and get better. And I did watch you through Instagram when you renewed your vows. So beautiful. Oh. And I can tell that you and your husband have an amazing relationship now.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that journey, with some of the steps that you all took to really dig in and create that?
Yeah. And I want to speak to women specifically here, but I know that this always touches men's heart when I'm on their shows or we have conversations. And it's this knowing that, like, we live in a very sexualized culture. Mm. And I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to multiplication, when we're talking about having families, we really are getting married under wrong context of what marriage is supposed to be. And we're doing it because we want to have kids, and that's what everybody tells us to do. And specifically for women, it's this sexualized idea that, like, I am his and he is mine, right? And when we think about MTV back in the day, we think about magazines, we think about porn, we think about all these things. I was indoctrinated to believe that I had to be intimate with my husband in a certain way, and that intimacy only meant lingerie or sexy music or candlelight or, Lord, I'm thinking 50 Shades of Grey in this moment, right? I mean, think about what we're exposed to on a given basis as normalized sexuality and femininity. If I didn't have like extra cleavage showing, was I really ever sexy? Like, it's really sad. And so for us, when we went through this experience of really getting to know one another. I would say the most dynamic element besides communication, which was massive. I mean, we bragged about the fact that at this point in our marriage, we'd been together for 7 years, that we had only fought 5 times. And we would tell people that, like, we're so alike. We have so much in common. We've only fought 5 times. Lack of conflict means you're lying. Okay. Yeah. Lack of conflict is lie. And so we didn't know how to confront one another. We didn't know how to talk about the things that were actually just like those little marks and those little shame moments or those little hurt moments that ended up compounding to like massive regret, right? So communication was huge, but also the conversation of intimacy. And what does it mean to be a woman? And what does it mean to be a man? And what does love look like? And for us, it was also, what does love look like without alcohol? So we haven't drank in almost 4 years now. And exploring that with your spouse was so nerve-wracking because it's all I ever knew. If you just give me one more glass of wine and then I'll be ready. Just turn the lights off and then I'll be okay. And it's like, no, like we live now in a lights on love. And I say that literally and figuratively, but like literally our light has been turned on because I love him to a degree that I never even knew possible because I know him. And it's just like that. Ganosh is the root word of knowing from the God who created you. He knows every hair on your head. And now while my husband doesn't know that, I have a greater love when it comes to my intimacy with God. I've now know what covenant love is. And I now know what my vows actually stand for. And I don't encourage anybody to do anything like I did or have anything happen to you like it happened to me as well. But it's this knowing that you have an opportunity to explore as a female, as a man. You get an opportunity to explore love with your spouse instead of just embrace what society tells you love is, because love is so much more.
So good. So you all now, what are you working on together as a couple? What are you working on as a speaker, as an author?
Yeah, so we're actually about to, at Grow Your Business for God's Sake conference, we're about to release that we are hosting marriage retreats. And so we're really excited to teach people these things. And it's not just from a marriage lens and an intimacy lens and a communication lens. We're both entrepreneurs. We have surely climbed out of that $100,000 of debt that I mentioned before, and we're doing phenomenal. We've expanded our portfolio in real estate, and we have 2 incredible little humans who are 7 and 9 who are also our little entrepreneurs. And so we want to help cultivate what it is that we believe God is calling kingdom marriages to be. And so this will be one of our first endeavors together as entrepreneurs. And so we're super excited about that. But we do everything in context. He's in HVAC. So like, I'm not super interested in like geothermal and energy efficiency and contract world, but right. I support him through and through, and he supports me in the speaking, podcasting. We're going into our 5th year of podcasting. So we love teaching people around that. And I really just want to lean into helping people understand that it's not just the obliterating shame that I've mentioned a couple times here. It's the next step. What do you do now? And why would you ever take a long pause like that to address shame? Because the next step, the activate purpose, is the fun stuff. The activate purpose is the passion. You get to ignite passion in a way that your masked self, your happy self, could never even ever explore because you were never actually free. But now in this freedom, now in this joy that you see me in, now this vibrancy, it all makes sense because 1, it's real. And 2, I had to really excavate the dirt and the grime and the hard parts of self in order to allow the light to shine in every corner. And while, like I said, no perfect people play here in this space, I am constantly in a state of surrender. And I think that's ultimately the key to success is being able to surrender. So whether that's in your relationship and you're willing to submit to not always being right, you're willing to submit to a togetherness that you maybe otherwise didn't explore, but it's the same thing in entrepreneurship. When I stand in a space of surrender and that my heart is just to help people and activate them to go to the next level of entrepreneurship, of business, of utilizing their gifts and talents for purpose, it is wild to see what God will do with it because right. Money's not my focus. People and hearts and souls are my focus. And so money follows.
I love that you have said the word surrender several times. You know, I have a plaque on my in my bedroom on my wall across from my bed. It's the first thing I see in the morning when I wake up.
Come on.
And it's just because, like you said, I felt this longing like you did at that point in your life, Tamara, where I knew I needed to take the pause.
Yeah.
And I bet so many people listening to this are craving that too. They just can feel it in their gut and in their soul that
Mhm.
they need a pause. They need a break. They need to reset. They need to, let some things go that they need to let go. And that's a monumental vision, right?
Yeah.
To hold. So what would be just a couple of things that you would recommend to somebody who's just really craving this right now to take? What
Yeah.
would be one or two steps they could take?
So understanding that a lot of people can't take years off, right? We would love
Mhm.
to say that that's the case, but that might not be. Retreats, and that's one of the reasons that we host retreats. I host women's retreats because I think when you're really exploring shame for the first time, you need a safe space that's where people really understand you, and it's a shame-free zone. And women understand women. That's why we have girlfriends, right? And so one is really explore where is a space that you can go and find freedom, and you can find a rest and a reset and a rejuvenation opportunity. Another thing is after you leave retreats, like you're still going back into those environments that might not be healthy, that might put you back on the rat race and the rat wheel of exhaustion and stress. Is what can you instill in your day every single day, right? People say that we're not promised tomorrow. Are you actually living today with that truth? And so is there an opportunity for you to journal? Is there an opportunity for you to leave legacy right now just by taking a walk and breathing into your phone what you're thinking about, or reflecting more? Get on your knees and pray some, right? Like there are pauses in our day that we have direct access to, but because we live in a glamorized, busy society, they think that the more you do, the more busy you are when you fall
Mhm.
asleep and you hit your head on the pillow, that like, well done, my good and faithful servant, because you did all the works. But that's not how you get to heaven. And that's not what's deemed righteous. And that's not what's deemed noble. And that part too isn't going on your personal tombstone. So when you reflect on what your tombstone, what your obituary going to read, actually do that exercise and see what comes out of it, and then reverse engineer your life. Reverse engineer your life. What is it going to take for you to get to a place where you're living in freedom, where you're living in joy, where you have an opportunity to go for a walk or meet a friend for coffee? What you need more than anything in the world, if you can't take the full pause, is you need margin. And margin is an
Mhm.
opportunity for you to get raw and real and remove the mask and live in a state of full freedom, even if it's just for a couple minutes as the starting point. Once you taste it, you want it all day, every day, and you will find a way. You will make a way, because it's in our free will to do. You will make a way for passion to be the way that you live, rather than to-do lists and checklists and the mask that I mentioned before.
So good. So, so good. The two things that I tell people, Tamara, as you know, is to first thing in the morning, I have quiet time, at least an hour, sometimes more, depending on the day. It's my saving grace. I
Yeah.
journal, I read scripture, I listen to people like Jay Shetty. I'm so glad you
Yes.
mentioned him. He's my
That's
new
awesome. I love
favorite.
Jay.
It just gets me in the right heart space and head space for the day. If I don't get that time in, the whole day is different.
Totally.
Right. And the second thing is you got to get really clear on a vision of what you want your life to really look like. Right.
Yep.
Crystal clear in every area of your life, because I was told when I was in my late 20s that I could create my life to look like whatever I wanted it to look like. I
Mm.
just needed to get really clear on what that was.
Mm. Do you think that that's true?
Do I think that it's true?
That you can create your life to look like whatever you want it to look like?
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is by Andy Stanley, and I kind of mix it up every time I say it, but it's
Yeah.
to write your vision in pen and your path in pencil.
Ah,
So
that's good.
my vision is clear because I'm clear on my purpose, Tamara. I'm really, really clear on what I'm called to do, and I know that you are too. The path has been a little wonky.
Yep.
So,
Yep, for sure.
right? But I stay the course, and I do believe
Yeah.
that people can create their life to look like whatever they want. They just have
Yeah.
to be willing to surrender what they thought it should be
That's it.
and really be honest with themselves as to what they really want, and then just take the baby steps. It's just baby steps every day.
Yeah. And I think there's such a beauty to that, right? If the exploration element, that's why I love fun and adventure so much, is because we need to have more play and we need to have more adventure in our life, because what we imagine is so much more through the lens of the Lord, right? Greater than you can ask, hope, or imagine is what your future will have in store for you when you're in that state of surrender and obedience to what it could become. And so it's really, if one day at a time, one action at a time, one voice at a time, one scripture at a time, is connected to this massive outcome of beauty. What are you willing to take? What are you willing to risk today in the goodness of risk and risking for your faith of what that vision will become? And to know, looking 30 years from now, looking back, like I'll have no idea exactly how it's going to all come to fruition, but I am certain that the God deposits of my passion, the God deposits of those visions will come to reality.
Right. And I think you and I are both here to remind people that the risk is worth it.
It is. It is. Carey, my word for the year is risk. My word for the year is risk. And my husband was like, that's a little scary. Right? And I'm like,
yeah, because didn't we already do that?
Exactly. Not like that, babe. No, it's the risk of faith. It's the not knowing, not seeing, not fully hearing. Peter risked getting out of the boat because Jesus told him to. And so it's really knowing for certain that the next step that I'm taking, I might not know what it looks like, just like we're talking about, but I'm certain it's to solid ground. And every person in the Bible, Jesus himself took risk associated to what would become. And so I want to risk big, and I want to do it for God's name's sake, not mine.
You are such a light, my friend. I appreciate you so, so much. I know that you've helped a lot of people with your story today. And I just want to ask you, how can people find you if they want to know more about the retreat you're doing and all the things?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I have a podcast called Fit in Faith podcast, and I have fitinfaithmedia.com. You can find me on Instagram. I hang out on my own name, Tamra Andress, TikTok, everywhere, really every social media platform, minus Snapchat for good reason. And so let's hang out. Let's chat. I love to pray with people. If you've been blessed or you've been convicted or you've been curious further about my story and you want to send me a DM, I love to voice memo with people, pray over you, and let you know that freedom is always above everything else. And so I appreciate you, Carey, so much for this.
Tamra, thank you for being here with me today. And I know, like I said, you've touched a lot of lives. So
I hope so. That's what I'm
Thank you all for watching this podcast, Moving Through and Beyond. I'm your host, Carey Conley, here to remind you to keep looking up. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member. In order to be successful on this mission, I can't do it alone. Connect with me at www.careyconley.com. And don't forget to sign up for my weekly Do It On Purpose newsletter. Let's build this life-giving vision movement together to end this epidemic, save lives, and create purpose.